faith, firearms, freedom. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode 29, sponsored by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters made in the great state of Georgia with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. CooksHolsters.com. So, how was your week? Did you watch the Communist Party Democrat Party convention in Philadelphia? Well, we'll talk a little more about that in a bit. But first, I wanted to share a couple of emails with you that I received, both in response to articles I previously posted reviewing the Zastava CZ99 pistol. I'll post a link to that review in the show notes. Brian Potratz writes, regarding the truck gun, with exception of the small suggestion, in my opinion, it's spot on post. However, my big weld checklist led me to choose one of your reviewed firearms before I had ever seen your site, the Zastava CZ99. At $300, I'm not as afraid to lose it as I am my 1911, and as you mentioned, no, it's not small, but it rides just fine in my dedicated fanny pack holster, which I can throw on and use reasonably well wherever a coat and tie is not required. The fanny pack also lets me carry 3 extra mags and gives me a place to put my wallet. Good for hiking or any casual activity. Still, with it concealed in the fanny pack, it rides just gym dandy and unobservable amongst the gear in my truck, and as a truck gun, it remains a stalwart backup to my other lower capacity CCWs should I be in a situation where 2 becomes 1 or less, and more bullets becomes more important. Thank you, Brian. Brian's referring to an article about the big weld rule for gun buyers that I wrote a while back. You see a need, you fill a need. Go watch the movie Robots with the late Robin Williams. I'll post a link to my article in the show notes so you can understand a little more about that. I hadn't considered it, but a surplus gun like the CZ99 would be excellent as a truck gun. It's tough as nails, it's reliable, it's inexpensive, and it's got plenty of capacity in a caliber that's sufficient for self-defense from a vehicle. So that's a great choice. Nathan Smith sent me this email. Thanks for the article. I picked up one of these pistols. He's referring to the CZ99. The finish looks awful, but it shoots great. I wanted to tell you that I was able to convert Beretta M92 92FS mags to use in it. Extra mags were hard to find and expensive when I did find them. The M9 mags have the exact same dimensions, at least the same where it's critical, and are usually easier to find. I had to cut a new hole where the magazine catches, which wasn't too difficult. I added a picture. I thought this might be helpful for shooters. Well, thank you, Nathan. I really appreciate that. I'll post Nathan's photo in the show notes as well so you can see how he modified his Beretta 92 magazines to work with the CZ99. Again, the CZ99 is a great, reliable gun. It's built like a tank. It's practically indestructible. It's not small. It's not for the faint of heart or small of hands. A good, reliable gun for fun at the range or as a backup or a truck gun. I definitely recommend it. And again, it's inexpensive. Yeah, you can find them as surplus, and the finishes are generally in pretty bad shape. The one I came up with and the one you'll see in the article where I did the review had been Cerakoted and refinished, so it looked a lot better than a lot of the ones you'll see out there. But most of the ones you'll see are Israeli surplus, and they've taken a beating, a lot of holster wear, but they clean up pretty good. If you've got comments or questions, or if you've got an idea for a segment you'd like us to discuss, or a training tip you'd like for Sergeant Bill to explore, hey, go to the feedback page on the website, armedlutheran.us/feedback, and send us an email or leave a voice message. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you guys for your messages. Really appreciate the feedback. On today's show, we've got some great stuff. We'll be talking about the Democrat National Convention and the focus, particularly on Day 3, on gun control. We'll examine the president's claims about gun violence in America in response to the Republican National Convention a couple of weeks ago. We'll talk about tips for dealing with the summer heat on the range and making the most out of your range time this summer. Sergeant Bill ran into some annoying shooters apparently at the range recently, and he's got a great segment about what he calls tactical Timmies. Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense talks about the myth of situational awareness. And by the way, Armed Lutheran Radio is hosting a day of training with Aaron. It's the fundamentals of defensive-focused shooting. It's hosted by Mission 160 Tactical in Whitewright, Texas, my home range, on October 22nd from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you'd like to come train with us, check out the show notes for a link where you can get more information and sign up. Tuition is $200, but if you use the promo code Lutheran, you can save 20% off the registration fee. And we're going to be joined by our newest contributor. We introduced her in last week's show, and we sent out an introduction to letting everybody know she was going to be joining us on Facebook and in our newsletter this week. Mia Anstine joins us for the first time to share a shooting tip. We've got lots of cool stuff in store for you right here on Armed Lutheran Radio.
Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
With those words, our founding fathers changed the world. They launched an experiment in freedom, where common lawful citizens are free to speak and gather and worship as they choose. But first among those freedoms is the one freedom that makes the rest possible. For 130 years, we've worked to preserve freedom first. I'm Wayne LaPierre of the National Rifle Association.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. You're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Silvia.
Hey, this is Sergeant Bill with your Ballistic Minute. Today we're going to talk about the tactical Timmies. Now, even if you're not aware of what this term means, I think you'll have probably seen one or two before. The tactical Timmy is the person that we call that because they're that guy that wears their tactical cargo pants or shorts everywhere. They are wearing a gun manufacturer t-shirt or a match t-shirt if they're a competitive shooter all the time. They're wearing, their favorite gun hat all the time. They scream, "Hi, I'm carrying a gun," when they're carrying concealed. They're also the guy that wants to have a lengthy discussion over which lubricant is the best one to get, is worth your money. It outperforms all the others and is just magic. Don't be a tactical Timmy. Timmies want to talk about how they carry such and such gun concealed on their waistband, appendix, or whatever the newest rage holster is, but then they also want to tell you that what they're carrying for a backup gun. Now, I'm a police officer. I carry a backup gun because I carry an open carry on a belt that everyone can see. That backup gun is there because somebody may someday try to take that gun from me because they can see it. If you're carrying concealed, having a backup gun is just saying, I don't trust the gun that I'm carrying. And if that's the case, you need to make sure it works. Make sure it's reliable. And then put that backup gun away, or just carry the one gun, or just the backup gun, whatever. If you're concealed, you don't need a backup gun. The tactical Timmy can be the guy that likes to buy every holster or aftermarket part that he can to try out for his gun, because he's got to get the newest, the greatest thing. Well, such and such holster's the newest thing. It's awesome. That's what all the super guys are carrying. And super guys, I mean the instructors like Travis Haley and such, where these guys have a tactical military background. Find out what works for your gun, what works for you, stick with it. The Tactical Timmy likes to talk bad about competitive shooting, even though he's never done it. He'll say it'll get you killed on the streets, yet they probably have absolutely no idea what will get you killed on the streets. Most big-name, notable firearms instructors don't really have any idea what's going to get you killed on the street or not. Most of them are military or ex-military. Some of them are ex-law enforcement. And there's not a whole lot of law enforcement that gets involved in gunfights. And even when they do, if one officer gets involved in a gunfight, they may not learn from it. They may have luckily escaped with their lives. They're going to regurgitate everything that was taught to them. I'm not saying they're good or bad instructors. I'm just saying you need to learn as much as you can. Put it in your toolbox. Decide for yourself what works for you and what doesn't. I know personally that competitive shooting has made me a better shooter. It's made me a faster shooter. I know guys that are high-level police officers, SWAT guys, that are supposed to be the best of the best. And you go onto the range with them, or I go onto the range with them, and they're astounded how much faster and more accurate I am than they are. And I'm not even that great a shooter in the realm of high-level competitive shooting. The Tactical Timmy likes to do the over-exaggerated moves so they look tactical, or tacticool as I like to call it. You know, you'll probably see them at the range if you have a range where they're allowed to draw. They're the guys that like to draw the gun straight up to their high chest and then exhale and slowly press it out because you want to calm yourself in a combat environment. I guarantee you, in a real combat environment, when I've had to draw my gun on people that I thought were just about to kill me, I wasn't exhaling and slowly pressing the gun out. You get it out as fast as you can and get on target as fast as you can. They like to practice drawing from a fighting stance. Because every street fight that I've ever been in, that's where I was. I was standing there like a pro boxer or MMA fighter with my hands up ready to go, and then I made that decision, oh, I need to draw my gun. It rarely happens. If it does, you are a participant. You're not a victim. There's a big difference between the two. And last but not least, one of my favorites of the Tactical Timmy world is everything is flat dark earth or desert tan, yet they live in a very green environment. Guys, it's camouflage. It's camouflage in the desert of Iraq or Afghanistan. You're not in a desert, unless maybe you're in a desert, and then that's understandable. But realize, most military guys with flat dark earth rifles have them that way because that is the color that blends in the environment where they were operating. It's not a fashion statement. Lots of the Tactical Timmies like to believe that they're know-it-alls, that they know everything there is to know about everything gun-related, and that their way is the right way, and they don't want to listen. There's something that I heard a long time ago, and I've always believed it, especially for shooting, and for a lot of other things as well. Once you were a beginner, you're always a student. You're always learning. You're always evolving. Always search for that knowledge. Practice. Learn. And get better. Don't be a Tactical Timmy. Be a shooter. Keep practicing. Get to the range. Keep getting better. This has been your Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill.
Buy Apple hardware, software, or gadgets at discount prices on AppleShopaholic.com. Read reviews about the latest iPad, iWatch, and Apple TV. Find the best deals on iPhones, Macs, and iPods at AppleShopaholic.com. Visit appleshopaholic.com now. That's appleshopaholic.com.
Help support Armed Lutheran Radio. Visit www.patreon.com/armedlutheran and become a sponsor today.
Well, it's summertime in Texas, and that means 100-degree weather is here for a while. And really, if you live anywhere in the southern United States, the southeast or the southwest, it's freaking hot. So how do you stay cool when you go to your outdoor range? Well, here's a few tips. The range, for example, the range that I go to, there's not a whole lot of shade. In fact, there's none. So if your range is like mine, you don't have a lot of options. And even if you do, you can't stay in the shade the whole time when you're shooting necessarily, especially if you're practicing any kind of practical pistol or 3-gun or anything like this. So how do you beat the heat when you're shooting in an outdoor range in the summer? Here's some ideas. First thing, schedule your range trip for the early morning or late afternoon, depending on whichever is cooler. Here in Texas, it's in the mornings. For example, I'm planning on going to the range on the weekends, early mornings from 8 to 12. You'll get to the range, it'll be 80 degrees. By the time I leave, it'll be in the mid-90s. If I go in the afternoon, say from 4 to 8, it'll be 97, 98 degrees by the time I go to the range, and it'll still be 90 degrees plus by the time I leave at 8 o'clock. So depending on where you are, that may be different. But find a good time, early morning, late afternoon, when it's cooler. Hydrate is the next tip. Drink lots of water before going to the range and while you're on your way. If you're going in the morning like I do, drink your coffee or your energy drink while you're getting ready, and then switch to water and drink water on the way to the range. Keep sipping while you're there. Make sure that you're hydrated. The other thing I would recommend is you prep everything in advance. Maximize your range time. You have a limited amount of time that you can be there. You may only be able to stay at the range for a certain amount of time based on limitations of, reservations based on money, or based on, other people's use of the range. So maybe you can only reserve for a certain number of hours, or because you've got to pay by the hour or something like that. In my case, you have an unlimited amount of time that I could reserve a bay for. But I really don't want to take a large block of time because it's going to get hotter and hotter as the day goes on. So I want to maximize the time that I've got. So prep everything in advance. The last thing you want to do is spend time at the range doing prep work when you could be shooting. Putting on sunscreen before you leave the house, loading all your magazines, that kind of thing. Maybe even putting on your gear. For example, I have a gun belt that I keep, loaded up with my holster and my magazines for dry fire. Maybe go ahead and set that stuff up the night before, lay everything out, put that on and wear it in the car to the range. That way, when you get to the range, you're not spending a whole lot of time doing prep work. Plan your range time before you leave, so that make sure that you're practicing with a purpose. There's no sense wasting time at the range trying to decide, well, what are you going to do next, when every minute you spend is just getting hotter and hotter. I'm going to spend the first 15 minutes doing this. I'm going to do this drill. I'm going to do that drill. I'm going to do this drill in that order. Write it down. Make a list the night before you leave. And then when you get to the range, you know exactly what you plan to work on, in what order, and for how long. And that way you don't have to come up with or, go look at a book and figure out, okay, well, maybe I'll do this drill next, or maybe I'll work on that drill next. Plan it out. If the drill requires the use of props, plan out how you're going to position the props so that, and maybe even, diagram it, take a few pieces of paper with you, set that out on the table or on the top of a barrel, and then turn the page. Okay, I've done that drill. Now go position your props and make the most of it. The other thing you can do if your drills require the use of props is select drills where you don't have to do a lot of changes with your props. For example, if you can run a drill one direction and then run it another direction, backwards, for example, run it right to left and then left to right, that doesn't require you to do a whole lot of changing, stopping and moving things around, wasting time essentially by moving your props around. Set them up, run one drill one direction, another drill another direction, that sort of thing. Or maybe, for example, I was running a drill the other day where it was basically a drill to practice changes of speed based on the distance to target. So you had 3 targets. You had one at I think it was 3 yards, one at 10 yards, and one at 15 yards or 20 yards. I think it was 20. And they were staggered. And so I would draw and then I would engage in tactical priority. And it was designed so that I would shoot the closest one fast and then transition and change speeds as the distance increased. So I ran that for a little bit, and then I wanted to change it so that I was shooting, instead of going right to left, I wanted to go left to right. So that only required me to change the position of 2 targets, and then I was able to run the drill a different direction. So make your drills flexible so that you don't have to do a whole lot of prop manipulation or changes, and you can keep shooting. If you've got an umbrella or a portable canopy, take that with you. Set it up if there's no shade available at your range. Bring shade with you, essentially. Keep your gear in the shade as much as possible. Magazines, cell phones, spare guns, your ammunition, all that stuff as it sits out there on the table and the sun gets hot. So keep that stuff in the shade, and if there's shade available, make use of it. If there's not, bring shade with you. And last but not least, take gloves. If you have to or you want to collect brass after you shoot, your fingers will thank you if you take gloves with you. Because after a couple or 3 hours of shooting, that brass gets really hot in 90-degree weather. And it's a lot easier to put on a pair of work gloves and pick that stuff up than it is to try and pick it up with your bare fingers. It's already going to be hot, the sun beating down on your neck as you're bending over picking up the brass. If you're also burning your fingertips trying to pick up that hot brass off the ground, it's not going to be a whole lot of fun. So take a pair of gloves with you too. So there's some tips to beat the summer heat for your outdoor range trips in the summer. Hope that helps. Now get out there and practice.
It's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. I'm Alan Gottlieb, founder of the Second Amendment Foundation. When someone says we don't need that kind of gun, remind them the Founding Fathers determined what rights our Constitution should protect. There's a world of difference between rights and needs. It is not the function of government to tell us what we need or what we don't. Certainly no one needs an assault rifle or a Saturday Night Special, or for that matter, no one needs a Corvette with a high-capacity horsepower engine capable of speeds to 150 miles per hour. But in the hands of honest, responsible individuals, we have the right of choice. We have the right to read books others don't like. We have the right to listen to any radio program we choose. We have the right to dress the way we want to. We we also have the right to own firearms of our choice. So the next time someone tells you you don't need something, tell them it's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. Join the Second Amendment Foundation today so that this message and our Bill of Rights might live. Call 425-454-7012. That's 425-454-7012.
Hi, this is Reverend Ken Blanchard, also known as the Black Man with a Gun, and you're listening to my friend and brother from another mother, the Armed Lutheran.
And welcome back. It's time now for a self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week I want to talk to you about the myth of so-called situational awareness. If there are two words more overly used in the personal defense world, those are them. On any comment thread under any dashcam video or news report about a violent attack, there's pretty much a guarantee that somebody's going to chime in and advise that if you had more situational awareness, you could avoid a similar fate as the victim in the article or the video. While I understand the underlying thought process that people who overly use this phrase have, the concept as they understand it just isn't borne out in reality. If you care about personal defense, you should make good decisions about where you go, what you do, and generally try to pay attention to what you're doing in life on a day-to-day basis. It's obviously a bad idea to sit there and stare at your cell phone all the time, updating Facebook or playing Pokemon Go while being oblivious to your surroundings. That's a fact, and if people mean situational awareness when they say it like that, then I agree with them. However, when most people say have more situational awareness, what they're really trying to describe is some mystical state of being where you can have a sense of any potential threat on your environment like some sort of a Marvel comic hero. Usually there's charts or color codes involved talking about being in condition orange or condition red or whatever, describing some heightened state of awareness. The whole idea is simply wishful thinking. Speaking practically based on human physiology, we have only so much information that we can take in and process at any given moment with our five senses. The best way I've heard it illustrated is to think about your awareness as a $1 bill that you get to spend with each passing moment. Picture yourself sitting in a restaurant with your significant other. When your waiter arrives to take your drink order, you're probably spending something close to 50 cents on telling him that you want that Coke, right? The other 50 cents might be spent looking at your significant other in your periphery as they place their order. Then you go to having a conversation like people like to do at dinner, and your partner may then get something like 80 cents worth of your awareness while the rest of the room in your periphery gets 20 cents or less, right? When you hear a plate break in the kitchen, it may startle you and you may look over and give that kitchen 40 cents or 50 cents worth of your awareness while keeping the other half of it still trying to stay in the conversation that you were just having before the plate broke and you heard it. With each passing moment, you are allotting your awareness to different things with a different frequency, depending on what's going on in your environment. As such, you can never be in some mythical heightened state of awareness of everything that's happening around you. Even if you forego conversation and quote-unquote scan your area or your sector or whatever you want to call it, you're going to have to stop and focus on things intermittently during that scan, or you aren't actually going to see anything, which is once again budgeting that awareness just as I described. The point is, no matter how switched on you may think you are, you can always be caught off guard and forced to respond to something that you didn't perceive ahead of time. As such, people who care about personal defense shouldn't focus so much on this mythical understanding of situational awareness, but should rather accept that they can be caught off guard and then learn how to deal with the body's natural reactions and respond efficiently when and if you are caught off guard. If you sit with your back to the door, refuse to talk to your spouse at the restaurant, constantly scan your environment, and order off of a Braille menu so that you don't have to look at the waiter so you can keep scanning, right? You're still going to be susceptible to ambush because of the real limitations of your human senses. Something can always sneak up on you. If that were not so, we wouldn't be wired to react instinctively to things that do catch us off guard. So yeah, pay attention to what you're doing. Keep your eyes up, look around, see things happening in your environment, process that information, make decisions about it, but learn counter-ambush training models and be prepared for the time when you don't see the threat that you may have to deal with without seeing it ahead of time. We cover that extensively in the defensive focus shooting class, and we'd love to see you out on the range and learn how to apply those skills. That's your personal defense tip of the week. You can find us at fundamentaldefense.com, and thanks for tuning in.
So you have your concealed carry permit or license to carry. Now what? Now you need a good holster. Not one of those cheap neoprene prophylactic holsters you can buy in the big box stores. You need a holster custom built for the firearm you intend to carry every day. Check out cooksholsters.com. Made in the USA, Cooks holsters are available in a wide range of colors and designs for inside the waistband or outside waistband carry. They carry a lifetime warranty against defects and a 100% satisfaction guaranteed. Visit www.cooksholsters.com and use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and take 15% off everything in the store. You put in the time and effort to legally carry a firearm for personal protection. Protect your firearm with a custom holster from cooksholsters.com.
At the Republican National Convention a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump and others who spoke pointed out correctly the rise in violent crime in some of our major cities and the rise in violence against police. There's no doubt that violence is on the rise this year in particular. Just look at Chicago, where murders have doubled. Look at last year, where murder in the 50 largest cities in the country rose 17%. In response, our thin-skinned president decided that he would attempt to defend his dismal record during a press conference with, I think it was the president of Mexico, and he wanted to try to paint a more rosy picture of America. Interestingly, though, he decided to use the kinds of facts that gun rights advocates use when he and his allies are wringing their hands about the epidemic of gun violence. Here's a little montage of the president, his statement in response to the Republican convention, and you decide.
The one thing that I think is important to recognize, you don't see murder on this kind of scale with this kind of frequency in any other advanced nation on earth, is this idea that America is somehow on the verge of collapse. More than 11,000 Americans were killed by gun violence in 2013 alone. 11,000. This vision of violence and chaos everywhere. To step back and recognize these tragedies have become far too commonplace. It doesn't really jibe with the experience of most people. I mean, I hope people the next morning walked outside and somehow this has become routine. The birds were chirping and the sun was out and the reporting is routine. This afternoon, people will be watching their kids. My response here at this podium ends up being routine. Playing sports teams and go to the swimming pool. And we've become numb to this. Folks are going to work and getting ready for the weekend. And we are the only advanced country on earth that sees these kinds of mass shootings every few months. And in particular, I think it is important just to be absolutely clear here, that some of the fears that were expressed throughout the week just don't jibe with the facts. Unalienable right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, those rights were stripped from college kids in Blacksburg and Santa Barbara. So let's take two specific examples. When it comes to crime, the violent crime rate in America has been lower during my presidency. Our levels of gun violence are off the charts than any time in the last 3-4 decades. We kill each other in these mass shootings at rates that are exponentially higher than any place else. Well, what's the difference? And although it is true that we've seen an uptick in murders and violent crime in some cities this year, as a country, we have been through this too many times. The fact of the matter is that the murder rate today, the violence rate today.
And we have a pattern now of mass shootings in this country that has no parallel anywhere else in the world.
Is far lower than it was when Ronald Reagan was president.
We see
the prevalence of these kinds of mass shootings in this country. And I think so many Americans sometimes feel as if there's nothing we can do about it.
So which is it? Violence is at historically low levels, or blood's running in the streets? Doom and gloom, or sunshine and unicorns? How can you claim everything's great, but then go back the very next week at your own party's convention and claim that gun violence is an epidemic? I call BS. What do you think? I think his words speak for themselves.
If you try to purchase a gun for someone who can't, you can buy yourself 10 years in jail. If a friend or relative asks you to lie to a federally licensed firearms retailer so you can buy a gun for him, don't do it. It's not worth 10 years in jail. Whatever you do, don't lie for the other guy.
This message is brought to you as a public service by the NSSF, the National Shooting Sports Foundation.
Hello, this is Pastor Brian Wolfmueller of Table Talk Radio. Hey, pay attention, because you're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.
So the Democrat National Convention is done, and it's now on to the general election. It's the hair versus the pantsuit. But the contrast is pretty clear, I thought. The DNCC was a dumpster fire. WikiLeaks released emails from the DNC proving that they colluded with the media to stack the deck against Bernie Sanders. I knew that was going to happen. There was no way that Bernie Sanders was going to get anywhere near the nomination. Hillary can talk about how she's against the big banks, but the big banks are funding the Democrat National Committee and all of its candidates. They're in bed with the big banks. Bernie believes all that stuff. He is a true believer. There's no way they were going to let him get anywhere near the nomination. And the WikiLeaks emails proved it. Efforts to court Hispanic voters were referred to as Taco Bowl outreach, proving who the real racists are. One email suggested that Clinton should attack Sanders by suggesting that he's a Jew or an atheist because with their peeps in the South, quote unquote, that would play well. On the opening day of the convention, Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz was forced to resign from her chairmanship of the convention over the email scandal. She was booed off the stage when she addressed the Florida delegation that morning. Nancy Pelosi was booed when she addressed her delegation the same day. Even Bernie was booed when he addressed his delegation and suggested that they had to vote for Hillary. They replaced Debbie Wasserman Schultz with the mayor of Baltimore, another hyphenated liberal, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, the mayor during the Baltimore riots, and she is the one that told the police to stand down and give the protesters space to burn the city. Here in Philadelphia, the DNCC, they had protesters from every liberal wingnut organization poised to tear the place to the ground, and it was just interesting that she would be the person chosen to gavel the thing into session. During the convention's opening prayer, there were protesters booing and shouting at the mention of Hillary's name. It was an interesting spectacle. It was the kind of thing that you just wanted to pop some popcorn, sit back, and watch the whole thing explode. There was a special kind of irony that the Democrats were building an 8-foot-high, 4-mile-long fence around the convention to keep people out, and they were requiring photo ID for anybody who wanted to come in. While inside, they would be ridiculing the Republican Party and its nominee for wanting to build a wall at our southern border to protect America and wanting to require people to show ID to vote. It really was the Star Wars bar scene on steroids.
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
It was absolutely a freak show. Once Senator Cory Booker came on stage and started shouting about the Declaration of Interdependence, I decided I'd seen all I could stand.
In this city, Our founders put forth a Declaration of Independence, but let me tell you, they also made a historic Declaration of Interdependence.
And then on day 3, it was wall-to-wall gun control. They brought out the mother of one of the victims of the Orlando nightclub attack to ask where common sense was the night that her son died. Oh, gee, I don't know. It was probably the same place where the warnings went about the gunman when he went to the gun store and acted suspicious, and they reported him to the FBI, but the FBI did nothing. You know, he worked for a government contractor. He was not on any watch list. The gun store that reported his suspicious behavior to the feds, they were ignored. So when the government says, if you see something, say something, but does exactly nothing when we do say something, why do these pinheads think that passing a background check law would make a difference? I'm sorry, but if you think it's unseemly to be critical of the mothers and the children of the victims of these attacks, you'd be right, it is unseemly. But when these people are willing to become political pawns and activists in the effort to limit the rights of law-abiding Americans, hey, they've crossed a line and they're fair game. The Democrats then brought out this Weasley Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut to once again dance on the blood of the kids at Sandy Hook.
I am furious that in 3 years since Sandy Hook, 3 years of almost daily bloodshed in our cities, the Republican Congress has done absolutely nothing to prevent the next massacre. It stokes inside me a sense of outrage that I've never felt before.
He was talking about how Trump sees gun violence and he sees an opportunity. Well, what the heck are you doing, Senator? Every time there's a shooting, your party sees an opportunity to push gun control instead of doing something to actually stop the violence. Then they played a video featuring the daughter of the principal from Sandy Hook Elementary. Now, remember when the media and Democrats condemned the Republican National Committee for using the 9/11 attacks in videos during the 2004 convention? How it was considered unseemly and deeply disturbing to use footage from that awful day in videos to politicize the terrorist attacks. So how isn't it unseemly to use video footage from the murder of school children in a video at the Democrat National Convention in an effort to push ineffective limits on the rights of law-abiding Americans? In the video, Erica Smigelski, forgive me if I pronounced your name incorrectly, Miss Smigelski, I am sorry. I'm Southern, it's what I do. She's the daughter of the principal who was killed at Sandy Hook. She says she's angry because her mom was murdered, and that's completely understandable. Anyone with a heart was angry that day and in the days that followed. But then she said this.
Hillary Clinton is the only candidate that has what it takes to take on the gun lobby. No one is fighting harder to reform our gun laws than Hillary. She reminds me of my mother. She isn't scared of anything.
I'm sorry, but hearing that, what I'd like to ask Ms. Smigelski is this. Exactly what laws is Hillary proposing that would have saved your mom? I'm serious. Maybe Hillary could make it more illegaler for children to kill their parents. Maybe she could pass a law to make it more illegal to steal a gun. Maybe we could pass a law that would make it really illegal to carry a gun into a school. Or I know, we could make it a crime to shoot people.
Ooh, that's brilliant.
Now, you may think it's not nice to mock somebody, especially the daughter of a victim of a mass shooting. But she's not just a victim. She's an activist, and she's now an advocate for Hillary Clinton. As such, the gloves come off. Former police commissioner of Philadelphia, Charles Ramsey, came on stage, and he called for, quote, common sense measures to reduce gun violence. And you can guess what that means. Background checks and an assault weapons ban.
Now more than ever, we need a strong, steady leader to stop the bloodshed. A leader that'll protect our officers from being outgunned by weapons of war and to rebuild the bonds between police and communities.
And he said this is why he supports Hillary. The funny thing is that he basically admitted that the current guy in the White House is a failure, and he's broken the bonds between police and the community, which is true. The problem with all these statements is clear. First, weapons of war are almost never used in crime on American streets. Modern sporting rifles are not weapons of war. Secondly, more people are killed by handguns, blunt objects, and hands and feet than by all types of long guns, including shotguns, hunting rifles, or modern sporting rifles like the AR-15 combined. In fact, more people are killed just by hands and feet than by modern sporting rifles. Thirdly, the bonds between police and the communities they serve have been broken by the Democrat Party, the civil rights leadership in this country, Black Lives Matter, and the current occupant of the White House, who blames racist police every time there's a shooting involving a white cop and a black criminal. He jumps to conclusions and blames the cops. But despite all the mistrust and the hatred and the BS coming from Washington, D.C., police officers are still out there on the street serving the communities who hate and mistrust them.
In honor of all of American fallen officers, with a moment of silence.
The problem, Mr. Commissioner, isn't guns. It's criminals, and it's Democrats. It's our getting away from what they used to call broken windows policies, where we would proactively police high-crime neighborhoods. The astronaut, Mark Kelly, spoke on Wednesday and introduced his wife, Gabby Giffords, who earned saintly status simply because she was shot in the face by a deranged Democrat, and has turned that into her life mission to infringe on the rights of law-abiding citizens, said,
"In Congress, I learned a powerful lesson. Strong women get things done."
So why support Hillary? She's where she is today because she's Bill's wife. She stuck with him while he cheated on her from Arkansas to Washington, D.C. Her list of accomplishments is what? And here's a phrase we heard a lot of.
The gun lobby. The gun lobby. The gun lobby.
The Washington gun lobby. Gun lobby.
The gun lobby.
And it got really, really tiring. So now we know where the Democrat Party stands. Now we know what the stakes are. Look, I'm not a Trumpster. I never was. I was a Carson and Cruz guy from the beginning. Then the shooting in Colorado Springs happened, and Dr. Ben Carson blamed the shooting on the heated rhetoric on both sides of the abortion debate, and he lost my respect and my vote from that point forward. And at that point, my support went entirely to Ted Cruz. But Cruz didn't win. The people have spoken, so I have a choice. I can stay at home and hope for the best, or I can vote for Hillary. Or I can vote against Hillary by voting for Trump. Look, we know what Hillary wants. She wants to destroy the Second Amendment. She may not say it. She may not come out and say it. But if you can't see that that's what she wants, you're blind. And if you want to sit home and say, you know, I can't vote for the lesser of two evils, then don't be surprised if you wake up one day and you don't have any rights. Because that's essentially what you're asking for. I'm not willing to take that chance. How about you? We'll be back in a minute with more here on Armed Lutheran Radio. Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. I am excited to introduce you to our newest contributor here on the show. Mia Anstine is a certified firearms and archery instructor, a hunting guide, a writer, and a speaker. She writes regularly for Women's Outdoor News. She and her husband own Wolf Creek Outfitters in Colorado. She blogs, records videos about exploring the modern Wild West. And when she's not writing, speaking, or teaching, she spends something like 200 days out in the wild. She's got a great perspective that I am really looking forward to sharing with this audience, and I know you guys are going to enjoy it. I introduced you to her last week in episode 28. She also happens to be an armed Lutheran. So, without further ado, I am excited and honored to bring to you Mia's motivations here on Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hello, everybody. I hope you are all having an outstanding day. I am happy to be here chatting with you, and today I wanted to share a shooting tip. A while back, Lloyd and I were discussing the Remington Arms little RM380 pistol, and this little gun feels outstanding in your hand. Its all-metal frame is very comfortable, and while we were chatting, we also discussed the trigger pull on this little pistol. The pistol does have a long trigger pull, so it leads me to want to discuss with you exactly where do you put your trigger finger on the trigger when you're shooting a pistol. Now, there are debates constantly about where exactly the trigger finger should go, and some people say it's in the middle of the pad of your trigger finger. Others say it's at the crease of the first joint of your trigger finger. This little gun will teach you that actually will vary. In order to take up the slack of the trigger pull on this pistol, if you have long fingers, you're going to want to insert your finger a little further into the trigger. So what I'm suggesting is you may want to try some safe dry fire drills before you head to the range. Test this out in a safe location and vary your trigger finger on the trigger as you depress it. Try it in the middle of the pad, pull, shoot. Scoot your finger in just a little further, pull back till the hammer goes. Then maybe try it at the crease, pull back, and see how that goes. The whole idea is you want to be pulling slowly until you take up this slack. You want to pull up that slack and then pull steady until the hammer actually strikes. You want to do this without varying your sights on target. So, first of all, practice some dry fire drills so that you can get comfortable with your grip and where the trigger finger is going to be on the trigger. Then, as you head out to the range, practice on target. Let's see what is going to work best for you. Is the middle of the pad a little further, or is that crease going to be the location for you with your size hands? I hope this really helps you in your shooting tips in some of these subcompact guns. And be safe at the range. Talk to you later. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mia, and welcome aboard. It's great to have you as part of the cast here on the show, and thank you to all you listeners. That's going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you for listening, downloading, and subscribing the Armed Lutheran Radio podcast. Thank you to all of my contributors this week. They're in Israel of Fundamental Defense, Sergeant Bill Silvia, and of course, Mia Anstine. Hope you'll tune in again next week for another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @ArmedLutheran and like us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/TheArmedLutheran. You can contact us by email at armedlutheranradio@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 855-54-ARMED. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.